I was supposed to introduce the silent auction, the one with framed lighthouse prints, and a weekend at the Hale Grand, when Leonard's tablet decided to be helpful. It floated a new message right over the donor list: invoice, lake suite, content package, a name I recognized from glossy feeds. He caught me looking and smiled that host smile. "You're overthinking again, Vic." Maybe. Or maybe I'd finally arrived at the part where thinking turns into doing. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The ballroom lights hummed low and golden, the kind of light that forgives wrinkles and expense reports. I adjusted the microphone and looked out over the donors, most of them neighbors. The same people who bragged about backyard renovations on the community app and sent polite complaints about our recycling bins. Everyone adored Leonard. They called him a self-made success, which was technically true if you ignored the years of balance sheets I'd quietly mended while he played visionary. He worked the crowd with a perfect handshake-to-laugh ratio, his tie the exact color of our hotel logo. Watching him was like watching a magician whose tricks you've seen too many times. Every gesture rehearsed, every story revised to make him sound humble. I used to find it charming. Now it looked like camouflage. When the event wrapped up, I slipped out before the applause could fade. The parking lot smelled of mulch and expensive cologne. Leonard's voice trailed behind me. He was telling the bartender to keep the after-party private. That word, in his mouth, had stopped meaning what it should. By the time I got home, the house felt too bright. I turned off the foyer chandelier he loved. 12 crystal arms for 12 good years, he'd said when we installed it. I went straight to the kitchen, set my purse on the counter, and stared at the still surface of the granite. My reflection looked like someone considering an equation. He came in 20 minutes later, his suit jacket draped over his shoulder, charm still on autopilot. "You left before dessert," he said. "Dessert looked familiar," I said. I opened the refrigerator just to have something to do with my hands. He chuckled. "Ah, the famous sarcasm. What is it this time?" "The invoice that popped up on your tablet. Lake Suite, promotional services. Same week you told me you were in Chicago for investor meetings." He leaned against the counter. "You're reading into business expenses again. It's called marketing, sweetheart." Sweetheart had become his code for stop asking. I shut the fridge, turned to face him. "You bought her a handbag that costs more than my car." He didn't even flinch. "Write it off." For a long moment I watched the rise and fall of his shoulders. He wasn't afraid or ashamed, just amused. "You're really going to make this a scene?" he said finally. "No," I said. "I'm going to make it a plan." That earned a sharp laugh. "Go on, leave. You'd last a week without me." I nodded, as if he'd just confirmed an appointment. Then I slid my car keys and my wedding ring onto the marble. They made two small metallic sounds that felt larger than shouting. Without another word, I walked out. The night air felt heavier than usual. Not dramatic, just the kind of weight that happens when a person finally stops pretending. I got into my car and drove without music, without destination, letting the roads decide. Grace Tully lived 7 minutes away, though she always called it 6 when traffic behaves. We hadn't been close since Leonard's company parties turned into little power summits, but I knew she kept a guest room and an open fridge policy. When she opened the door, her expression slid from surprise to curiosity. "You and Leonard fighting again?" "Just finished," I said. She offered tea. I asked for Wi-Fi. By midnight, the plan had shape. I started with the trust transfer. Months earlier, I'd prepared documents to move my shares of Hale Hospitality Group into a private trust. At the time, it had been an exercise in caution. Leonard's habit of borrowing signatures had gotten sloppy. I'd kept the notarized forms sealed, waiting for a reason. Tonight qualified. I uploaded them through the secure portal, checked timestamps twice, and received instant confirmation. Next, I revoked the power of attorney that gave him access to my accounts. That took a polite midnight call to Paula Lynn at the bank, Paula, who admired precision and loathed scandal. She didn't ask questions, only promised to file the revocation first thing in the morning. The last task was an email to Eleanor Bryce, head of the company's board. Subject line: Material control weakness. I attached a brief summary: irregular transfers from the emergency reserve fund marked marketing spend. I kept it factual, unemotional. A good consultant reports numbers, not heartbreak. When I closed my laptop, the clock said 1:12 a.m. Grace had fallen asleep on the couch, half watching a rerun of a cooking show. I felt oddly calm. In the morning, the calm held. I brewed coffee, scrolled through community updates, and saw the first tremor ripple through Fairview Crest. Anyone know why the Hale Grand postponed the spring gala? The comments section bloomed with speculation. By the time I reached the kitchen, Paula had texted, "Freeze enacted, confirmation attached." I imagined Leonard waking up to a phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. I pictured him calling his father, then Eleanor, then me. I didn't pick up. By 8, the neighborhood grapevine had started fermenting. Grace's phone lit up every few minutes. Nora Flynn, HOA treasurer and self-appointed social reporter, left a voice memo whispering, "Is it true the Hales are separating? Someone saw Victoria at your place last night." Grace deleted it without comment, but I smiled. Some gossip is free advertising. At 9, I drove back to the house for clothes. The driveway was half blocked by Leonard's new car, a sleek import I'd advised him not to buy. The curtains were open, his way of signaling composure. I stepped inside quietly. He was at the kitchen island, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp. "What do you mean suspended access?" Pause. "That's impossible. My wife." Another pause. Then quieter. "She can't. She wouldn't." I took a small satisfaction in watching realization replace arrogance. When he finally noticed me, his jaw clenched. "You did this." "I filed routine notifications," I said. "Apparently, the bank agrees with my definition of routine." "You're sabotaging your own company." "Our company," I corrected. "And no, I'm just protecting it from you." He muttered something that might have been a curse or a compliment. "You think this makes you strong? You've just burned your life." I prefer to think I redirected it. I packed clothes methodically, neutral dresses, jeans, the cardigan he hated. The silence between us hummed with the same electricity as the ballroom lights. When I left again, his phone was still ringing. Grace watched from the window as I tossed my bag into the trunk. "You're scaring him," she said. "I'm teaching him to read the fine print." By late afternoon, the first real tremor hit. Paula called to confirm that the main investor, Eleanor's committee, had been alerted to the discrepancies. Leonard's father, Charles, had demanded explanations. Meanwhile, the company's main supplier refused deliveries until payment terms were clarified. It was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, each toppled by a single misplaced signature. I didn't celebrate. I organized. I transferred backups of financial records onto an external drive, labeled neatly, placed in Grace's fireproof box. I contacted my insurance agent about my car, updated my address, then walked to the local park and sat on a bench beneath a maple tree. From there, I could see the Hale Grand sign rising above the horizon, letters gleaming like nothing had changed. The distance between illusion and audit, I thought, is about 5 phone calls. By evening, Fairview Crest was humming. Text threads leaked miniature versions of my life, half-truths, polished into gossip diamonds. Someone claimed Leonard had run off with an actress. Someone else said I'd emptied the accounts. Only one detail was accurate. I'd left. Grace scrolled through the feed, shaking her head. "You're trending locally." Perfect, I said. People remember headlines longer than explanations. I took another sip of wine and watched the notifications roll in. Among the noise, one image froze me. A blurry photo from the Lakeside Hotel suite, posted by an anonymous account. The caption read, "Guess who checked in with the boss?" The silhouette in the picture wasn't Kylie Hart. Too tall, too broad-shouldered. Grace peered over my shoulder. "That's not her," she said. "No," I murmured. The angle was poor, but the posture, the tilt of the head, was familiar. Leonard had always called his associate Julian the fixer. I'd called him something else, a mirror. Always nearby, always reflecting Leonard's better angles. I closed the phone. "It's never about who you expect," I said. Grace waited for me to explain, but I didn't. I was already constructing the next layer of the plan in my head, neat as an audit trail. That night, the neighborhood hum faded under rain. I lay awake on the guest bed, listening to the roof's rhythm. Somewhere, Leonard was discovering that charm doesn't open frozen accounts. Somewhere, his father was realizing that public image can't outvote numbers. I thought of the line he'd thrown at me. "You'd last a week without me." I smiled in the dark. It had been 24 hours, and I'd already reorganized the battlefield. When morning came, the rain stopped. I brewed coffee and opened my laptop to find 3 new emails. One from Eleanor requesting a formal briefing, one from Paula confirming that the freeze would remain until an internal review, and one from an unknown address containing the subject line, "You'll regret this." The message body was blank except for a photo attachment, Leonard's car parked outside a restaurant next to Julian's. Grace leaned over my shoulder. "You're not even flinching." "I'm past flinching," I said. I moved the photo to a new folder titled Evidence and deleted the message. By noon, my phone buzzed again. Nora Flynn's number. Against better judgment, I answered. "Victoria, everyone's talking. Are you okay? We heard about the freeze. Chaz was at the club this morning saying something about audits. You know how rumors are." "I do," I said evenly. "Well, some people think you're in trouble, but I told them you're too smart for that. You always had those spreadsheets under control." "That's kind of you, Nora." "Kindness has nothing to do with it, just facts." Facts, I thought. They were going to learn what those felt like. When I hung up, Grace looked impressed. "You sound like someone writing a new script." "I am," I said, "and the best part is, they'll all act their parts without rehearsal." That afternoon, I drove past the Hale Grand again. Reporters weren't there yet, but I saw the staff whispering near the service entrance. Leonard's office window was dark. A delivery truck idled and then pulled away. The Empire still stood, but the foundation was softening. At a stoplight, my phone pinged with a new alert. Bank inquiry regarding loan guarantees. I opened it and laughed quietly. The system was already folding in on itself. By evening, I'd done nothing but watch it happen. Sometimes revenge doesn't need fireworks. Sometimes it's paperwork and patience. Grace asked if I was ready for the fallout. "Fallout's just what people call consequences when they didn't read the terms," I said. The sky was violet when I returned to her porch with a glass of water. Across the street, Nora's curtains twitched. Fairview Crest couldn't look away from a scandal any more than a cat could ignore movement. I checked my watch. 36 hours since I'd placed the keys and ring on that counter. The world hadn't ended. It had simply adjusted its focus. When I went inside, Grace was scrolling again. "You're not going to like this," she said, passing me her phone. A community post showed a photo of Leonard pacing in the Hale Grand lobby, phone to his ear, headline, "Crisis at Hale Hospitality. Founder seen in heated calls as accounts frozen." The comments were merciless. Guess his charm card got declined. I handed back the phone. "People love a spectacle," I said. "They do," Grace agreed. "Just make sure you control the lighting." That night, I opened my laptop one last time. I updated my notes, aligned the columns, saved the document under a simple name. Week 1. Outside, the town settled into its version of quiet, sprinklers ticking, distant laughter, the mechanical rhythm of ordinary lives continuing. Inside, I rehearsed what I'd say when Eleanor called tomorrow. Short sentences, measured tone, professional detachment. I closed the laptop and whispered to no one. He should have asked what I was capable of. The maple branches brushed against the window like a soft metronome. For the first time in years, I slept easily. And somewhere across town, Leonard Hale woke to a world where every number answered to me. By morning, Fairview Crest smelled like damp grass and news. The town loves its headlines tidy, preferably with a bow. Mine didn't come with a bow. It came with an automated bank notice and a committee calendar invite that would make stronger people reach for aspirin. Paula called at 8 on the dot. We're maintaining the freeze on discretionary accounts. Payroll and essentials remain operational. I'll need a formal memo from you for the record. Already in your inbox, I said, because of course it was. A pause that sounded like careful approval. You're precise, Victoria. I'm motivated, Paula. She explained the mechanics in her clean banker cadence. The bank would limit outgoing transfers that weren't tied to contracts already on file. Any vendor added in the last quarter would be flagged for manual review. She emphasized that none of this implied wrongdoing. It was a protective measure. I agreed out loud and thought, not wrong, but not innocent. Somewhere between the two lived the things Leonard called marketing. His father phoned me, Paula added, voice leaning into dry humor. He suggested that policy should be flexible to vision. I suggested that policy should be policy. Thank you, I said, meaning it. After the call, Grace brought me toast and a look that said she had opinions. He's going to spin this as a creative misunderstanding. Spin whatever he wants, I said. The drag coefficient is real. By 9, my phone began its community chorus. Nora posted an HOA reminder about keeping garbage cans hidden and then added a little PS. Sending love to anyone navigating hard times. We're a village. 3 comments below, someone asked if the village accepted returns on monogrammed pool towels. The internet is an efficient mirror, and it never asks permission to be unflattering. At 11, I met Kylie at a coffee shop that pretends to be rustic, with its reclaimed wood, but charges an urban price for oat milk. She arrived late, wearing sunglasses inside, as if light had become a personal attack. When she removed them, I saw that she was not a villain. She was exhausted. Thank you for meeting me, she said, voice small. I got messages from numbers I don't recognize. People are tagging me in posts about your marriage. It's gross. I'm not here to shame you, I said. I'm here for facts. She passed me a folder like a magician producing a rabbit. Inside were contracts, tidy as any I'd drafted. Her engagement with Hale Hospitality had been booked through an agency, Julian's agency. Deliverables, curated content, travel reviews, 2 appearances at pop-up events. The invoices matched the numbers I'd seen on Leonard's tablet. The signatures didn't. I never dealt with Leonard directly, Kylie said. Julian did everything. The gifts were part of the brand package. He said he was aligning me with a hospitality lifestyle, whatever that means. I flipped pages, found variations of our company name I recognized in a way a spouse recognizes a loose board on the porch, slight but revealing. HHG, HEH Group, Hale Hosp. Common tricks to create onboarding shadows. Nothing illegal on its face, just purposely blurry. Did you and Leonard... I began, then stopped. I wasn't going to ask the question the internet cares about. I cared about money, not gossip. No, she said anyway, reading my mind. We took photos, that's all. He seemed more interested in angles than people. I figured it was his job. Julian was the one who acted like he owned the air. Thank you, I said, and meant that too. She kept talking, relief loosening her shoulders. He told me he was building a halo around the brand. He said it was all above board. I should have known better when he asked me to tag the company in posts that weren't approved in writing. Who else did he bring in? A videographer, a creative producer, mostly contractors who would invoice his agency, not the hotel. Did Leonard ever ask you to change an invoice? No, he barely messaged me at all. Honestly, half the time I thought Julian was writing as him. We sat in a corner with our coffees cooling into dull, trustworthy brown. Outside the window, Fairview Crest went about its business. Dog walkers with artisanal treats, a stroller brigade in matching athleisure, two men arguing about parking lines like the future of the Republic hinged on a tire-touching paint. I looked back at the contracts and thought about handwriting, metadata, the little crumbs people leave when they're too confident to tidy up. "You're not going to blow me up online, right?" Kylie asked, a child asking whether the thunder will come through the window. "No," I said. "I'm not here for spectacle. I'm here to fix the ledger." She nodded like I'd handed her back her pulse. "I'm sorry for whatever I made harder." "You didn't," I said. "You were a lure. Lures don't choose who casts them." Back in the car, I called Grace. "Our influencer is a decoy." "Knew it," she said. "What next?" "Back corridors." "Victoria," Grace said, pretending to scold, "you're going to snoop." "I'm going to walk in a building and read words people put on paper, and maybe follow a clipboard." Snoop is such a loaded term. "Well," she said, "at least wear flats." The Hale Grand Service entrance smelled like detergent and ambition. I knew these hallways the way a stagehand knows a theatre. What looks glamorous front of house is mostly cords and tape behind the curtain. A maintenance schedule was taped to the wall. Fire alarm test at 3 p.m. The universe, for once, had read my calendar and felt generous. Grace met me by the loading dock with a tote bag and a look that said we were high schoolers again, breaking into the gym to move the spirit banners. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure about not being sloppy." At 3 precisely, the fire alarm test began, a measured wail programmed to ensure compliance. People move fast when alarms happen, even scheduled ones. That's not panic, that's workflow. We followed the clipboard. It was attached to a man with purposeful strides and a reflective vest that said vendor check-in. He had a lanyard full of keys and the posture of someone who's been told that everything is urgent. Grace and I merged with a cluster of staff heading in the same direction. The clipboard man cut left. We cut left. He ducked into a records room. We took up positions just outside like two women discussing flower arrangements. I counted the seconds, 1, 2, 3, then stepped in. "Hi," I said in my most helpful voice. "Nora sent me for vendor file verification. Which shelf did the PR invoices go to? They're supposed to be flagged for Eleanor." I said Eleanor's name with the casual authority of a person who provides snacks to board meetings and can therefore move mountains. He blinked, pointed vaguely, and hurried past us to answer an alarm text question about zone mapping. Some people are kind to their own misdirection without realizing it. I scanned the shelves. The files were labeled by quarter: Q1, Q2, Q3. The last one had a slimmer spine, as if it were on a diet of excuses. I found a clear pouch with a thumb drive inside labeled Event Sizzle, HHG. The handwriting looked like a person trying to make their letters behave for a teacher they didn't respect. Grace raised one eyebrow. "Sizzle? Marketing loves a kitchen metaphor." I tucked the drive into my bag while Grace put the pouch back with enough care to make a saint proud. The alarm ping cooled into silence. We walked out at the pace of people who had been in a boring meeting and were eager to find better coffee. In her car, we didn't speak until the seatbelts clicked. Then we said it together. Laptop. Grace's living room had become a small command center, cords, binders, a tray of snacks disguising itself as a civilized choice. I plugged the drive in, expecting the usual. Overproduced music, aerial shots of our own hotel edited to look like a stranger. The first clip was exactly that. The second wasn't. It was a surveillance angle of the Lakeside Suites hallway, probably from a camera meant to capture housekeeping traffic. Time-stamped. No audio, just the hum of being. Leonard exited the room first. Julian followed, their shoulders almost touching. Leonard's tie was loosened, not in a scandalous way, just in the way a man takes a breath when the performance ends. Julian reached out, fixed the knot, smoothed the lapel in a gesture so familiar it felt private. They walked down the hall, not like employer and contractor, but like people orbiting the same gravity. I clicked to the next file. A still photo of the suite table, wine glasses, a laptop open to an email draft that began, from Leonard Hale to Kylie Hart, brand weekend plan. The cursor blinked in a tone I could hear despite the silence. The angle suggested someone had taken the shot quickly, carelessly. It also suggested that the person composing that email might not have been Leonard. "Don't assume," Grace said softly. "Let the pattern tell you what it is." "The pattern says influence," I said. "It says dependence." More clips, a collage of ordinary intimacy. Julian passing a room key across a palm. Leonard taking it without looking. The kind of shorthand you only develop when you're used to someone finishing your sentences. I closed the window before Grace could read my face. I didn't need the internet's favorite labels. I needed the ledger's favorite words: authority, authorization, scope. Julian positioned himself between Leonard and every outgoing spend, I said. He built the brand around that position. If Leonard tried to pull away, he'd risk embarrassment. If he leaned in, the spending escalated. Either way, Julian got paid. "You think Leonard knew the details?" "He knew some," I said. "He didn't know enough. He never does when someone flatters him properly." Grace leaned back. So the influencer wasn't the story. "No," I said. She was the prop in a bigger frame. I pulled up email metadata from the attachments we'd collected. The drafts attributed to Leonard routed through a content platform that Julian's company administered. Of course they did. Efficiency can be a harness if you don't watch who's buckling it. "What are you going to do with this?" Grace asked. "Use it without humiliating the part that's private," I said. "This isn't about anyone's orientation, and we're not turning someone else's life into a punchline. I'm going to keep it in the realm of governance where it belongs." Sometimes the kindest thing you can do with a revelation is aim it away from the softest parts of a person and into the systems they built to protect themselves. It still lands. It just lands where it can be measured. I called Paula and asked a hypothetical designed to be an arrow without naming names. If a contractor appears to be exercising de facto control over discretionary spend by editing communications and onboarding vendors under name variations, what would your risk team need to see? "Chain of authorization," she said. "Email headers, vendor onboarding forms, any pattern indicating the principal wasn't the one initiating the transactions." "I'll assemble a packet," I said. "You'll have it in the morning." "Victoria," Paula said, hesitation wrapped in professionalism. "Are you safe in all this?" "I'm efficient," I said. After we hung up, Grace studied me. "You're not rattled." "I'm an accountant of emotion," I said. "I only assign it where it will yield returns." She smirked. "You sound like a villain, and I mean that as a compliment." "I sound like someone who stopped apologizing for competence." We worked through dinner, building timelines. I color-coded Julian's entries in a neat slate blue, Leonard's in hotel gold, mine in unassuming grey. The pattern became crisp. As the influencer push ramped up, so did Julian's access. He had inserted himself between question and answer, and the invoices lined up to reward that position. None of it screamed illegal, all of it whispered unwise. At 9, my phone lit with a name I hadn't expected to see, Kylie again. "He's angry," she said without greeting. "Julian, he left me a voice memo about loyalty and contracts. I shouldn't have met with you." "You met with a consultant. I said calmly. You're fine. You also might want to review your contract for a termination clause that lets you withdraw if a client's governance is under review. She breathed out a shaky laugh. Of course you know that. Read Section 9, I said. It's usually there. Thank you, she said. And, I'm sorry, again. Move your content calendar to neutral posts for a while, I advised. Say you're focusing on wellness and nature. People love hiking pictures. After we hung up, I turned to Grace. Tomorrow we go public without performing. What does that even mean? We make a room where facts sit under good lighting. That's all. I slept that night like a person who had finally filed the correct form. The next day dawned with the clean smell of routine. I met with Eleanor in a small conference room at the Hale Grand, deliberately neutral space with beige art that whispered, "We have money and no imagination." She was ironed within an inch of her life, every pleat obedient. "You've created a stir," she said in lieu of hello. "I've created a pause," I corrected. Pauses are where people decide whether to think. We went through the packet. I let the paper do the talking. Emails that came from Leonard's account, but were routed through Julian's content management. Vendor onboarding forms, where the address field had been massaged to split our name into variations that avoided standard approval workflows. Nothing so clumsy it could be prosecuted in a dramatic speech. Everything just slippery enough to cause a slide. "We'll need to address this with the investor group," Eleanor said, "and with Charles." "He will perform outrage," I said gently. "Then he will count." She didn't smile, but her eyes did something that could be mistaken for it. "You're not wrong." She stood, which in Eleanor language meant the meeting was over. "Founders' Weekend is in 2 days. I expect you to be available." "For the board?" "For the presentation titled Crisis Playbook, When Marketing Eats the Balance Sheet." Julian submitted it. He's scheduled to lead. I looked at her. "That's ambitious." "It's convenient," she said. "You'll sit front row." Afterwards, I took the elevator to the garage. Concrete has a way of equalizing princes and waiters. Down there, money is just metal and rubber, and, if you're unlucky, a puddle under your back tire. I walked past Leonard's new car and imagined future insurance calls. He liked to call cars investments. I liked to call them depreciating aspirations. When I reached the executive row, Julian was at his convertible, phone to ear, smile the kind a man wears when he's telling someone else how to live. He didn't see me until I was close enough to read the gleam of his tie pin. "Victoria," he said, summoning charm. "Finally ready to talk like grown-ups?" "Finally ready to stop billing us for your vanity," I said, pleasant as a weather report. His eyes cooled. "You don't want to be on the wrong side of this." "There isn't a right side," I said. "There's only the company and the drain." He moved to step past me. I stepped into his path with the kind of smile you offer a neighbor who keeps forgetting trash day. "You routed communications through your platform," I said. "You pushed vendor onboarding through name variations. You built a system where your approval looked like ours. You can't prove that." "That's the thing about systems," I said. "They prove themselves." He glanced over my shoulder, measuring witnesses that weren't there. "Get out of my way." I didn't. Instead, I reached toward the panel on the wall labeled Sprinkler Test. Maintenance once again had been generous with their signage. I pressed the test button. A gentle hiss rose from the ceiling. 10 seconds later, a controlled rain soaked the executive row. Julian shrieked as water peppered his leather seats. He darted to raise the top, but fumbled, hands slapping the controls in useless fury. The car beeped in protest, a tiny chorus of luxury failing. He turned on me like a play snapped in half. "You're insane," he sputtered, dripping. "I'm coordinated," I said, "and I checked with building management. Test cycles can be run between 2 and 3 without violating any policies. You're going to pay for this. Send an invoice to the address you like using," I said. "We'll see if it clears." He sputtered again, brand new shoes squeaking. It wasn't violent, it was humiliating. there's a difference, and I respect it. On my way out, I saw Leonard entering the garage, yelling into a phone. He stopped short when he saw the sprinklers and me beside them. "What did you do?" he demanded. "Preventative maintenance," I said, and walked past him without a flinch. Back at Grace's, I hung my jacket over a chair and felt lighter than I should have. "That was petty," I admitted. "It was precise," she countered, "and it photographs well." The neighborhood app proved her right within an hour. Someone posted a photo of the soaked convertible with a caption, "When branding meets plumbing." The replies were swift and creative. My favorite, "At least the car got a complimentary spa treatment." By late afternoon, I received an anonymous text. "You're going to regret touching that car." A minute later, "Rooftop, tomorrow night, if you want this to stop." I stared at the words, at the arrogance of assuming I'd play chase on cue. Then I looked again at the number. Unknown, but formatted like one of the disposable lines PR people use when they want messages without memories. Grace read over my shoulder. "You're not going." "I'll go," I said, "but I'll bring the stage." "How?" "Founders Weekend," I said. "The Q&A, Julian's session. We make the room." She nodded slowly. "He'll come unglued." "Probably. It will be educational." Evening rolled in with a sky the color of a suit you wear to court. I compiled the materials for Paula and Eleanor, printed copies on heavy paper that made every word feel like it mattered. I bounced between resolve and something like sadness, but not the movie kind. The domestic kind, the scent of a shirt you're giving to goodwill. At 8, I took a walk past our cul-de-sac, just to look at the house where my life used to queue up each morning. The windows glowed, staged like a listing photograph. For a second, I wanted to go in and stand at the kitchen island until memory apologized. Then I kept walking. A block later, my phone vibrated with another anonymous message, a grainy still of the lakeside suite, same angle as the thumb drive, but this time with a caption. "You don't know the whole story." Of course I didn't. Whoever does? But I knew enough. Enough to understand that this wasn't about two people and their choices. It was about power, access, and who gets to write the narrative and send the invoice for it. I returned to Grace's and found her packing a small kit like we were going camping. "Snacks," she announced. "High-protein bar, electrolyte packets, mints." "I'm surrounded by generals," I said. She saluted with a cheese stick. Before bed, I checked the calendar. Founders Weekend in 48 hours. The Q&A title with Julian's name printed nice and bold. A board session penciled in for after. I placed my folder beside my bag and went to sleep, listening to the hum of a neighborhood that couldn't decide whether it wanted to root for me or sell tickets. Morning brought a message from Eleanor. "Confirmed. Your front row. Bring your packet." And one from Paula. "Received. Risk is engaged. Good work." I put my phone down and looked out the window. A couple jogged past, perfectly synchronized. A teenager practiced a skateboard trick, failing 6 times and crowing at the 7th. The ordinary world chugged along, indifferent. My own world felt anything but ordinary, even as it became simpler. Numbers, rules, rooms. Light them correctly and people see what they've been walking around for months without noticing. I poured coffee and opened the thumb drive one more time, letting the hallway clip play without judgment. 2 men walking, a lapel smoothed, a friendship that had drifted into something more tethered. I closed the window softly and whispered to the quiet room, "This isn't mine to shame." Then I opened my planner and wrote, in tidy block letters, the only sentence that mattered for the next step. Make the truth comfortable enough to sit in public. I slid the planner into my bag, checked my reflection, and gave myself the look I reserve for clients right before I save their quarter. It says, "You hired me to be calm." It says, "The numbers and I are on speaking terms." As I headed for the door, Grace called after me. What's our theme for the day? Logistics, I said, and a little theatre. Break a leg, she said, then winced. Figure of speech. Understood, I said, smiling. I stepped into the sun, which didn't care whose accounts were frozen or whose car had taken an unexpected shower. Across town, the Hale Grand's marquee flashed the weekend schedule in friendly font. One name glowed a little brighter to me than the rest. Julian Ames. I pictured him in a crisp blazer, perfectly composed, not realizing the room had already been rearranged. The phone buzzed once more. Another anonymous message, this time just a single word. Rooftop. I typed a reply and deleted it. No negotiations. Not yet. I slipped the phone into my pocket and walked on, the weight of the thumb drive in my bag like a coin you keep touching for luck. The clip had given me what I needed. Not gossip, not scandal, just a map. Influence routes, approval chains, which desks to watch when the music stops. I didn't know if Leonard would show up to the session or whether he'd hide behind boardrooms and fatherly advice. I did know that when the microphones lit and the crowd leaned forward, I'd be in the front row, packet open, voice steady, tone professional. I had a story to tell. It wasn't about romance or betrayal in the way the town liked to package such things. It was about a company that learned to confuse brand with permission. It was about a woman who stepped out of a kitchen, put down her keys, and picked up the light switch. And it was about an associate named Julian, smiling for cameras he didn't realize were facing the other way. Fairview Crest looked wholesome that morning, the kind of wholesome that cracks if you tap it with a spoon. The lawns glistened, the kids waited for the bus in tiny puffer jackets, and somewhere in one of those neat houses, my husband was inventing a new version of our marriage for public consumption. I could almost hear him rehearsing. Victoria's taking a little time to herself. Stress. You know how finance people are. I walked to the mailbox because moving felt better than waiting. Inside were the usual envelopes, one HOA bulletin, 2 charity invites, and a glossy flyer for the upcoming Founders Weekend. The Hale Grand was on every poster, smiling at itself. The fair would be the perfect stage, I realized. Everyone important would be there. The investors, the reporters, and Leonard trying to look unshaken. Julian, too. His name printed beside a workshop titled Crisis Playbook When Marketing Eats the Balance Sheet. Eleanor hadn't been joking. I folded the flyer, slid it into my bag, and told Grace, "We're going to the fair." "You're going to cause a scene," she said, eyes bright. "No, I'm going to design one." The day before the fair, I sat at my borrowed kitchen table drafting my own kind of sermon, a financial briefing written like a confession with footnotes. I listed every policy breach, every misfiled invoice Julian had touched, every cross-authorization Leonard had approved. I even printed the email headers that proved the messages were routed through Julian's content system. By noon, I called Eleanor. "I'll have a report ready for the investor panel." "I assumed you would," she said. "The chairman's already sweating through his golf gloves." "Good. Let him feel what liquidity means." Her laugh was short but real. "You'll fit in fine with us." When I hung up, Grace raised her glass of iced tea. To fitting in nowhere and everywhere. That afternoon, I parked outside the Hale Grand's garage again. Julian's convertible sat in its designated spot, dried and gleaming like nothing had ever happened. He was standing beside it, phone in hand, talking too loudly. He saw me and froze mid-word. "Come to gloat," he said. "Came to see if the sprinklers were still cooperative." He smirked. "You think you're clever because you made a mess in a parking lot." "No," I said. "I'm clever because you think it was a mess." He rolled his eyes and turned away. I caught his arm. Not hard, just enough to stop him. "We both know you've been using company funds to pay yourself through dummy vendors," I said softly. "You forged Leonard's approval on at least 5 contracts." "You can't prove—" "Julian, I have the logs. I have the metadata. I even have your agency's registration number attached to those invoices. His mask slipped for one sharp second before he laughed again. You wouldn't risk exposing Leonard. Who said I'd expose him? I'll let the bank do it for me. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're not that heartless, Victoria. I smiled. You haven't been paying attention. He moved to get in the car, but I was faster. I pressed the sprinkler test button again. The ceiling hissed, and within seconds, droplets rained over the luxury interior. Julian's curse dissolved into a strangled yelp. He scrambled to close the roof while I watched, arms folded, entirely serene. When it stopped, I said, Consider that a small adjustment to your brand image. Moisture adds authenticity. Are you insane? No, thorough. He glared, drenched, before stomping off toward the elevator. The garage smelled faintly of wet leather and ego. That night, Grace and I set up camp at her dining table. Tomorrow, I said, Julian's going to stand in front of the town and talk about crisis management. Let's make sure he has a practical demonstration. We spread out the papers. I arranged them by category: governance breach, contract irregularity, and discretionary misuse. Grace handled the visuals. She had a flair for presentation that would make a PowerPoint blush. We'll put up a timeline board, she said. Big fonts, easy for donors to read. The press will love it. I nodded. And if he tries to interrupt, I'll ask him to confirm his own invoices. Grace grinned. That's brutal. It's arithmetic. The morning of Founders Weekend arrived with the kind of perfect weather people write checks to claim credit for. The Hale Grounds lawn was crowded with tents and food trucks. A brass band played cheerful music that sounded slightly nervous. Leonard moved through the crowd in a blue suit, shaking hands as if he still believed charm was currency. I found Eleanor near the VIP tent, clipboard in hand, her posture military. Everything ready? I asked. The room is packed, she said. Julian's nervous. He requested extra lighting. Good, I said. We'll give him all the light he wants. She gave me a sharp look. Don't burn the building. I'll stick to controlled ignition. Inside the presentation tent, chairs faced a small stage. The screen behind it displayed the workshop title in cheerful font. Julian adjusted his microphone, pretending confidence. Leonard took a seat in the front row beside Chaz, whose face was already turning the color of undercooked salmon. I chose a seat near the aisle. My folder rested on my lap, heavy as judgment. Julian began his speech with rehearsed charm. Crisis is opportunity, he said, smiling like he'd trademarked the phrase. In hospitality, perception is everything. I waited until he switched slides to Transparency Builds Trust. Then I stood. Excuse me, I said, voice calm. Could you clarify which vendor authorized the influencer campaign expenses in Q2? He blinked. This isn't a Q&A yet. Oh, but it's always a Q&A when funds are misused. A ripple of whispers moved through the audience. Cameras lifted like flowers seeking light. Leonard's expression shifted from irritation to alarm. Julian cleared his throat. Those invoices were reviewed by senior management. Were they? I held up a copy of the vendor log. Because this list shows that the addresses were modified to bypass approval routing. He frowned. That's confidential information. Not when it's submitted to the board. I turned toward the crowd. I'm Victoria Hale, financial consultant and co-owner of Hale Hospitality. I filed the audit that froze discretionary accounts last week. The whispering became open chatter. Eleanor stood by the side of the stage, arms crossed but saying nothing. She didn't need to. Julian tried to recover. These documents are being taken out of context. Context, I said, stepping closer to the stage, is a lovely word for exposure. Leonard rose halfway, but his father pulled him back down. Cameras flashed. I could feel the collective pulse of gossip tightening, the way people lean in when a story gets good. Julian stammered something about partnerships and misunderstandings. I clicked my remote, advancing to the next slide. screenshots of emails showing his company editing our communications. His name was visible on every line. The crowd gasped. He looked at me like I'd set the ground on fire beneath him. "Transparency builds trust," I said. "Let's be transparent." He stepped down from the podium, face tight. "We should talk privately." "We did," I said. "You called it a threat." Leonard finally stood, his voice breaking through the noise. "Victoria, stop this." I turned to him. "You told me to leave. I took your advice. You said I'd last a week. It's been 8 days, and your empire is still calling me for help." He started to answer, but Eleanor's voice cut through the tent. "This session is concluded. The board will convene immediately." Applause erupted, not polite, but electric, the kind people give when they smell victory, even if they don't know who won. Outside the tent, Julian caught my arm. His smile was too calm. "You think you've won something. You haven't. Leonard has assets you don't know about." "Then he should read his contracts carefully," I said. "You're playing with lives, Victoria." "I'm balancing them." He leaned in close enough that I could feel the tension radiating off him. "Meet me tonight. Rooftop. We can fix this." "Your definition of fixing usually involves invoices." He squeezed my wrist, not painfully, but enough to test boundaries. "You're out of your depth." I met his gaze, unflinching. "I live in numbers, Julian. Depth is where I breathe." He let go, storming off toward the parking lot. I rubbed my wrist and exhaled slowly. Grace appeared beside me, holding 2 paper lemonades. "You just turned a corporate workshop into a gladiator match," she said. "I'm aware. Want to celebrate or strategize?" "Both," I said. "Celebration is just strategy with better lighting." We sat on a bench under the banner that still bore Leonard's smiling face. The fair continued around us, people eating cotton candy as if reputations weren't unraveling a few tents away. Grace handed me her phone. "Look at the town feed." A video from the session already had hundreds of comments. She owned him. Finally, someone said it. "Do you think she'll take over the company?" I scrolled once, then put the phone away. "It's not over." "Rooftop meeting," she guessed. "Of course, predictable as ever." "What's your move?" "I'll go," I said, "but not for him, for the math. I want to see what's left to calculate." Grace smirked. "Try not to push anyone off anything." "Not my style," I said. "I prefer watching them realize gravity exists." As the sun dipped, the fair lights flickered on. Leonard stood near the fountain, phone glued to his ear, gesturing wildly while Chaz paced beside him. Julian's car peeled out of the lot, tires screeching like punctuation. I watched the scene unfold and thought, everyone here is performing, but I'm the only one who rehearsed. Tomorrow would be the rooftop, the final ledger, the quiet knife that didn't need to cut, just to point. For now, I walked back to Grace's car, the crowd's murmur following me like an applause that didn't know when to stop. Founders Weekend looked perfect from a distance, the way a painting looks perfect until you notice the brush strokes. The Hale Grand Lawn had turned into a carnival of elegance. White tents, ribboned fences, the smell of roasted almonds. The air had that polite festival cheer that only money can buy. I stood near the entrance with my coffee and tried to look like another guest. Nobody noticed that my calm expression was the same one I'd used while transferring entire accounts in the dark a week earlier. The weather was clear, but the atmosphere had that kind of pressure you feel before a thunderstorm. Eleanor found me first. Her lipstick hadn't moved since sunrise. "The investors are gathered inside," she said. "Leonard's pretending nothing happened. He's working the crowd with his father." I expected as much. "Julian's here too," she added, scanning the fairgrounds. "He's been pacing near the media tent like a man waiting for a verdict." "He'll get one," I said. Eleanor's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You have the documents ready?" I tapped my bag. All printed, color-coded, and alphabetized. This time, no one talks over me. "Good." She started to walk away, then paused. "Victoria, be careful with how public you make this. People like Leonard don't take humiliation well. Then I won't humiliate him, I said. I'll just prove he doesn't matter. The fair swelled with visitors. Reporters hovered around the donation booths, sniffing for scandal. Kids ran between balloon arches. In the distance, I could see Leonard shaking hands with a group of local officials. He was smiling too hard. His father, Chaz, stood nearby, red-faced and fuming. Grace joined me, carrying 2 paper bags of kettle corn. "You're the calmest person at this circus," she said. "I've already seen the ending." "Still going to the rooftop later?" "Yes, but first, the parade." At noon, the fair's main event began, the ceremonial march of sponsors and board members down the central walkway. It was meant to symbolize community unity. What it really symbolized was ego hierarchy. Leonard led the group, waving like a senator. Julian trailed behind, adjusting his jacket every few steps. I stayed in the crowd until the parade reached the reviewing platform, then slipped behind the side tent marked Media Access. Inside were rows of reporters waiting for interviews. Nora Flynn, of course, was there with a phone and a face full of curiosity. "Victoria," she exclaimed, "care to make a comment?" "Just enjoying the fair," I said. "Rumor says you're the reason the company accounts froze." "Rumor is efficient," I said, smiling, "but efficiency is what got us here." I left her blinking and stepped toward the technical booth that controlled the sound for the stage. The volunteer engineer was distracted by a tangle of cords. I leaned over his shoulder and said, "Quick fix. You have the slide deck for Julian Ames loaded?" He nodded. "Yeah, crisis playbook, right?" "Perfect," I said, swapping his USB drive with mine. "This one's the corrected version Eleanor approved. Saves you the panic later." He thanked me without suspicion. People always trust confidence delivered in a pleasant voice. By the time Julian took the stage, the crowd was buzzing from free champagne and curiosity. He looked crisp again, new tie, new composure, but the twitch in his jaw gave him away. "Good afternoon," he began. "We're here to discuss reputation management, how leadership can turn challenges into opportunity." Perfect setup. I watched as my substituted slide deck loaded behind him. The title appeared as expected, but the first slide wasn't about leadership quotes. It was a flowchart labeled Corporate Oversight, Hale Hospitality Q1, Q2. The audience murmured. Julian turned, confused, and clicked again. Another slide, this one listing Vendor Authorization Pathways. My tidy arrows pointed directly to his firm's address. He froze. "Interesting data," I said loudly from the front row. "Would you care to explain why your company appears on both sides of the authorization process?" The reporters raised their cameras as if choreographed. Julian tried to smile. "There's been a mix-up. This isn't the intended presentation." "On the contrary," Eleanor said from the aisle, "it's exactly the one we approved." He turned pale. "That's not possible." Leonard jumped to his feet. "End this right now." Eleanor ignored him. "Mr. Ames, do you confirm your agency received payments from Hale Hospitality under multiple vendor names?" Julian's microphone squealed. He pulled it off, voice cracking. "This is a setup." I stood. "If by setup you mean accurate accounting, then yes." The crowd erupted. Some laughed, some gasped. Leonard climbed onto the stage, trying to grab the microphone, but the engineer, still assuming this was part of the presentation, adjusted the spotlight to follow him. Suddenly, the great Leonard Hale was standing under the light like a man auditioning for honesty. He tried to speak, but his father's voice thundered from below. "You told me everything was contained." The murmur turned into noise. Reporters surged forward. Leonard stepped back, sweat visible on his collar. Julian darted for the exit, but the hallway was crowded with staff blocking his path. I closed my folder and said quietly to Grace, "Curtain call." She exhaled. That was terrifying and beautiful. The board convened within the hour inside the hotel's private conference room. The sound of the fair drifted through the windows, like a memory that didn't belong to us anymore. Eleanor presided at the head of the table. Leonard sat 3 seats away, staring at his phone. Julian had disappeared, probably nursing his pride somewhere dry. "Victoria," Eleanor said, "you may summarize your findings." I did. Numbers, not emotion. The sums spoke for themselves. The emergency reserve fund had been tapped without oversight. The transfers routed through Julian's firm were double-billed. Leonard had signed everything without reading a word. When I finished, Eleanor said, "Based on this, the board recommends suspension of Leonard Hale pending audit. We will appoint an interim consultant to stabilize operations." Her eyes met mine. "That would be you if you accept." Leonard slammed his hand on the table. "You can't do this." Chaz glared at him. "You did it to yourself." I said nothing. I just signed the document when Eleanor slid it across. My hand didn't shake. Leonard's voice broke into a desperate laugh. "You think this fixes anything? You've only embarrassed the family. The investors will flee." "Not if transparency stays steady," I said. He stood abruptly and left, muttering under his breath. The door slammed. Eleanor sighed. "That's one fire contained. But be careful, Victoria. He won't retreat quietly." "I know," I said. "He invited me to a meeting tonight. Rooftop." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't go alone." "I won't," I lied. By dusk, the fair was winding down. The last of the vendors packed up. Balloons deflated and drifted like tired smiles. The fountain lights came on, bathing the courtyard in soft gold. I climbed the stairs toward the rooftop terrace, folder under my arm. The elevator hummed too cheerfully for the occasion. The doors opened to the open-air deck. The city stretched beyond, indifferent and glittering. Leonard stood by the edge, wind tugging at his suit jacket. He turned when he heard my steps. "Congratulations," he said bitterly. "You turned my company against me." "You did that all by yourself," I said. He walked closer. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. My father, the press. You think you've won?" "I think I finally stopped losing." He laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "You don't even know what you've started. There's a personal guarantee clause in the loan agreements. The bank can call them in now. That governance has changed. You'll drown in it too." I took out a paper from my folder and held it up. "You mean the guarantee clause I amended last year when we refinanced? The one that switches liability to the holdings trust upon breach of governance?" He froze. "You what?" "It was standard procedure," I said. "You signed it. You just didn't read past page 4. His mouth opened, then closed. The wind caught his tie, flapping it like a surrender flag. "You always underestimated me," I said. "You thought I'd fold quietly." He shook his head. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said softly. "I just stopped protecting it." Below us, camera flashes flickered as reporters packed their gear. Somewhere down there, the board was already issuing statements. Leonard looked toward the city lights, voice low. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you face the numbers, without me balancing them for you." He stared at me for a long moment, then walked to the stairwell door. "You really think you can run this alone?" "I already am," I said. He left without another word. I stayed for a while, watching the skyline. The air smelled faintly of rain again, as if the world was ready to rinse itself. Somewhere below, music from the fair drifted upward, soft, uncertain, like applause that didn't know which side had won. Grace's text arrived just then. "You alive?" I typed back, "Yes." Quiet knife worked. Later, I stood by the hotel lobby window. Staff hurried past, whispering, eyes darting toward the elevator Leonard had taken. Eleanor was talking to a group of reporters near the front desk, calm as a judge. When she saw me, she nodded once. "We'll issue a statement tonight," she said. "You did well." "It's not over," I said. "He still has allies." "They'll read the reports and see reason," she said. Grace joined me as the last of the reporters left. "So, what now?" "Now," I said, We let the math settle. Outside, the fair's final fireworks started, bright, quick, and already fading. The crowd cheered without knowing what they were celebrating. As the last spark dissolved into the sky, I thought, every empire ends quietly at first. Tomorrow, Leonard would discover the rest. The repossession notice for Julian's car, the frozen personal accounts, the board's public statement. But tonight belonged to silence and the clean sound of something ending exactly the way it was supposed to. The morning after the fair smelled like burnt coffee and redemption. Grace had already made toast, which was her version of a victory parade. She slid a plate toward me. "You're trending," she said, holding up her phone. I didn't need to look. I could already hear the town talking through the walls, neighbors pretending to garden while whispering my name. Fairview Crest didn't need cable when they had front-row access to their own scandal. "Any good comments?" I asked. She grinned. "Half the town thinks you're a genius. The other half thinks you're terrifying. Personally, I think you're both." I bit into the toast. "That's balance." Eleanor called an hour later. "The board's meeting with the auditors today," she said. "Leonard's suspended pending investigation, and the press has been fed the official line. Governance restructuring, not scandal." "Elegant phrasing," I said. She chuckled. "We learned from you. You'll need to be at the hotel by noon. Bring the signed amendments and your reports." "I'll be there," I said. After the call, Grace looked up from her laptop. "You ready to walk back into the lion's den?" "It's not a lion's den anymore," I said. "More like an unoccupied zoo." She smirked. "Still smells the same, though." At 11:30, I parked behind the Hale Grand, the same place where Julian's car had received its unplanned shower. The space was empty now. The puddles had dried, but a faint watermark on the concrete reminded me that not all stains fade quickly. Inside, the lobby buzzed with a strange energy, half tension, half relief. The staff greeted me differently now, respectful, cautious. Some smiled with the secret pleasure of people who had seen a tyrant stumble. Eleanor was waiting in the boardroom. She motioned to the chair at her right. "You're interim financial head until we decide on a permanent arrangement. Congratulations, I suppose." I sat, calm. "It's not the title that matters, it's the authority to clean." She nodded. "Then clean thoroughly." The meeting lasted 2 hours. I presented the audit trail, the safeguards, the new reporting structures. When I finished, the room was quiet, the kind of silence that meant people were calculating how to rewrite their allegiances. As we left, Eleanor touched my arm. "He'll fight back, Victoria. Just watch for it." "I'm counting on it," I said. Outside the conference room, Leonard was waiting. His tie was loose, his eyes dark with exhaustion. "You enjoying your victory lap?" he asked. "This isn't victory," I said. "It's maintenance." "You think this company will survive without me?" "I think it might finally have a chance." He laughed sharply. "You think you can handle what I handled? The clients, the negotiations, the pressure?" "I already did," I said. "You just took the credit." His smirk faltered. "You'll regret this." "I don't do regrets. I do reconciliations." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You humiliated me. My father won't speak to me. Do you know what that feels like?" "I know what it feels like to be dismissed by the man you saved," I said. "So, yes, I'd say we're even." He glared. "This isn't over." "I know," I said, walking past him. "You haven't learned to stop talking." By evening, Fairview Crest's gossip engine had reached full capacity. Grace's phone buzzed every few minutes. "Did you hear Leonard moved out?" "Someone saw Julian's car towed." Apparently, the investors froze his personal credit lines. Grace read them aloud like verses from a suburban hymn book. "They're eating this up," she said. "It's like watching a soap opera filmed on our street." "Good," I said. "Let them talk. It keeps them out of the details." "Any plans for an encore?" "One last act," I said. "Rooftop tonight." He sent another message. Grace frowned. You're actually going? Yes, it's better to end a storm while you're still holding the umbrella. The Hale Grand rooftop looked different at night, quieter, emptier, but the city light still painted everything gold. Leonard was there, pacing near the railing with a drink in his hand. You came, he said when he saw me. You invited me, I replied. He set the glass down too hard. You think you've won, don't you? You think the world's applauding you for humiliating your husband. I didn't humiliate you, I said. You did that yourself. I just made sure the audience was awake. He turned toward me, the wind tugging at his shirt. I built everything you have. You built a tower on sand, I said. I just watched it tilt. He looked out over the city. They're saying I misused funds, that I lied, that I'm finished. They're saying you were careless, I said. And you were. He laughed bitterly. You always were the cold one, efficient, detached. I was patient, I said. There's a difference. He walked closer until he was only a few feet away. You could have talked to me. I tried. You told me I'd last a week without you. He hesitated. And did you? I met his gaze. It's been 10 days. He looked away, then back again. You ruined Julian. No, I said. Julian ruined himself. You just gave him the company credit card. You think this makes you strong? No, I said. It makes me finished. He laughed again, softer this time, almost human. You really mean that, don't you? Yes. He studied me, then nodded slowly. Fine. You win. Enjoy your little empire. He started to walk away. I called after him. Leonard. He stopped. You once told me perception is everything. You were wrong. Numbers are. He didn't answer. He just left, the sound of his shoes fading into the hallway. I stood there for a while, letting the wind cool my thoughts. The city below pulsed with its usual rhythm. Traffic lights blinking, people laughing in hotel bars, stories continuing. I'd expected to feel something grand, but what I felt was cleaner. Completion. My phone buzzed. A message from Eleanor. It's done. Julian confessed to the irregularities. The board voted unanimously to remove Leonard. Congratulations, Ms. Hale. Grace would have said something witty. I just smiled at the screen. When I stepped back into the elevator, I saw my reflection in the mirrored doors, tired, steady, unshaken. The woman who had once been the silent partner now looked like the author of her own ledger. Downstairs, the lobby was nearly empty. A young receptionist smiled nervously when I passed. Ms. Hale, she corrected quickly. The board asked me to give you this. She handed me an envelope embossed with the company logo. Inside was a single page, an official offer naming me Acting Chief Financial Officer, effective immediately. I signed it at the desk, borrowed her pen, and left the copy with her. Thank you, I said. She looked at me with awe and a hint of fear. Everyone's saying you turned the whole company upside down in 1 week. I smiled faintly. Then they should have asked what I was capable of. Outside, the night had turned cool. The hotel lights glowed like a theatre that had finished its final act. I walked to my car, heels clicking against the pavement, each step measured, deliberate. Grace was waiting when I got home. She opened the door before I even knocked. Well? It's over, I said. She handed me a glass of wine. You sure? I nodded. The bank confirmed. The board voted. Julian's contract terminated. Leonard's out. She grinned. You actually did it. I just finished what he started. We sat on her porch, quiet, watching the neighborhood lights flicker. Across the street, Nora's curtains shifted. Of course she was watching. Think she's posting about you right now? Grace asked. Probably, I said. Let her. It's cheaper than advertising. We laughed softly, the kind of laugh that belongs to people who've earned it. At midnight, I checked my phone one last time. The news headline read, Hale Hospitality announces new leadership amid governance scandal. No mention of me by name, but the photo was enough. The back of my head, hair caught in the wind, walking away from the podium. I turned off the screen, set the phone aside, and leaned back. Grace had fallen asleep on the couch, a smile still on her face. Outside, the sprinklers started, the rhythmic hiss echoing faintly through the quiet streets. I thought about the garage, about Julian's drenched car, about Leonard's last words. I thought about how revenge isn't fire. It's paperwork, patience, and the refusal to blink. I finished my drink, stood, and whispered to the empty room. Last week without me. The words hung there like a signature. The next morning, the sun rose over Fairview Crest, clean and unapologetic. I looked out the window, saw the mail truck pull up, and smiled. Somewhere in that pile of envelopes would be the first letter addressed to me under my new title. I'd spent 12 years fixing Leonard's mistakes. Now I'd spend one lifetime making sure mine were worth it. I closed the blinds, poured another cup of coffee, and watched the steam rise like a curtain call. The show was over, but the applause, soft, unseen, inevitable, was mine. The sky over Fairview Crest looked falsely peaceful, as if the town hadn't yet caught up with its own gossip. I parked in front of the Hale Grand, straightened my jacket, and checked the message from Grace. They're setting up for the shareholder address. You ready to be infamous? Famous fades, I typed back, effective lasts. Inside, the lobby buzzed with reporters and anxious executives rehearsing innocence. Staff nodded politely. No longer Mrs. Hale, just Ms. Hale, with the careful respect people reserve for someone who might sign their checks. Eleanor met me at the elevator. Leonard's insisting on speaking first, she said. Let him, I said. The world should see what denial looks like under lighting this good. On the rooftop, rows of chairs faced a podium with the company crest. The skyline glowed behind it, a city unaware that its favorite hotel was now a cautionary tale. Grace stood near the back, camera ready. Smile like you own the place, she whispered. I do. Then Leonard appeared, thinner, sharper, every step rehearsed. His father followed, stiff and red-faced. The applause was polite and brief. Leonard gripped the podium like it might anchor him. Hale hospitality remained strong, he began. Recent events have been exaggerated by internal confusion. I stepped forward. Correction, I said, clear and steady. The confusion was yours. The crowd shifted, cameras turned. Leonard blinked. This isn't your time, Victoria. It's my company too, I said. Check the paperwork. You signed it. His laugh was brittle. You always needed to prove you're smarter. No, I said. I needed to prove I existed. He glanced at the cameras, desperate for control. You hacked our systems. You framed me. Show them the logs, I said. Show them the invoices, the double billing, the signatures. Your name's on every line. He said nothing. Eleanor walked forward, voice precise. The board has verified Ms. Hale's audit. Effective immediately, Leonard Hale is removed from all operations. Leonard turned on her. You can't... The LED banner behind him flickered, then switched from the company logo to the audit feed I'd scheduled earlier. The numbers filled the screen. Transactions, timestamps, his authorizations, projected 20 feet high. The crowd gasped. Chaz muttered something that sounded like surrender. Leonard spun, staring at his own name repeating in light. You set me up. No, I said. You left your fingerprints everywhere. He tried to reach the control panel, but security stepped in. The microphones caught his ragged breath. Go home, Leonard, I said quietly. The performance is over. He hesitated, straightened his tie, and muttered, You'll regret this. Already accounted for. He left, shoulders stiff, walking into the building as the cameras followed him like vultures. When the doors closed, the rooftop fell silent except for the hum of the banner. Eleanor turned to me. That was brutal. It was clean, I said. The board's unanimous. You're in charge now. I'll do it my way. She smiled. That's why we voted yes. Grace joined me by the railing, wind tugging at her hair. That was the single most dramatic spreadsheet presentation in human history. "I told you numbers could entertain," I said. She grinned. "You're not going to miss him even a little." "I'll miss the version I invented to survive." Below, the Hale Grand sign glowed like a monument to arrogance. For once, I didn't feel small beneath it. Later that evening, I returned to the house, our old house. It smelled faintly of lemon polish and ghosts. The rooms were tidy, soulless, as if waiting to be staged for a sale. I left one envelope on the kitchen counter. Leonard's final account statement stamped closed. On top, my spare key. "Go on, leave," he'd said. I had. Outside, Fairview Crest shimmered in early evening light. The neighbours would talk, of course, they always did, but their curiosity no longer belonged to me. At sunrise, I made coffee and opened my laptop. The headline blinked across the screen. Victoria Hale, named acting CFO after governance overhaul. No melodrama, no adjectives. Just fact. Exactly how I liked it. Grace texted, "You did it. You're officially terrifying." "I'm officially efficient," I replied. I set my mug down, looked out the window at the neat lawns and the ordinary world going about its business, and smiled. Small, certain. A week ago, I'd walked out with nothing but keys and silence. Now, I had a company, a future, and a name people finally said with caution.